Hi guys, this is your base techniques and we're going to be focusing on a matte foundation for someone with more oily skin. So this foundation is going to be more full coverage, it's going to be set with a lot of powders, and it's great for people who do have more oily skin because it's going to stay put the entire day. To start, you're going to cleanse and moisturize the skin as you normally would. For oily skin, I recommend using more of a water-based moisturizer because it's not going to be as rich on the face and it's going to still provide the right hydration for the skin, because even oily skin still needs hydration. Then what you're going to do is ask your client where they actually get oily. Some people may get oily all over their skin, other people may be more combination and tend to only get oily in certain areas. So I ask them specifically where on their face they actually get oily. So it might be just the cheeks, it may be the T-zone, it may just be the chin. Wherever they specifically get oily, that's where I'm going to put a mattifying primer. So a mattifying primer will tend to have more of like a silky feeling to it. It may be a bit more pore filling, or it will have a bit more of like a grip to it. So you'll feel it when you rub it into the skin. It almost starts to dry out itself and makes the skin look way less shiny immediately. So I'm going to put a mattifying primer only on the areas that someone would normally get oily, which is usually the T-zone, so the forehead and the chin and around the nose. I'm leaving the cheek area here for just the moisturizer to work. If you're applying primer or moisturizer with a brush, I recommend a stippling brush like this because it will spread the product over a really wide area. Next, I'm going to take my foundation. So I'm going to use a matte foundation that is quite full coverage. So taking 1 to 2 pumps of the foundation, you're going to need less and then you're able to build it up where you need it. A lot of matte foundations set pretty quickly, so you do have to work quite quickly with them. And I'm going to apply this with a buffing brush first. So first I'm going to just dot this all over the skin where we want the most amount of coverage. So for me, that is my cheek area. So I'm first spreading that all over and just putting a small amount of that product everywhere first. And now I'm going to take buffing motions, but I can already feel that foundation setting. So it is one of those products that you have to work quite quickly with, because if I want to add any more coverage anywhere, I still want that foundation to be still in the kind of beginning stages of setting so that I can add more where I need it. So I'm just putting my brush down and kind of just doing a small downward stroke and kind of just patting that product into the skin to blend it. I don't want to be making like big long strokes like this because that will tend to create brush strokes in the foundation. So I'm just doing little stamping motions all over with that buffing brush. And I'm avoiding the eye area because we're going to put concealer there. Don't forget to take it down the neck, and immediately my face is pretty much full coverage. So there's only a few little areas I want to add a little bit extra. To add just a tiny bit more of that product, I'm actually going to take a beauty sponge and I'm going to just pounce a little bit of excess product over the areas I need a little bit more coverage. The reason I like to use a sponge is because I just find it kind of melts that product into the skin slightly and gives a really flawless finish. So now the foundation is as built up as I would like it. I'm going to apply some concealer around the eyes. This gives the foundation some time to kind of set itself before we put any powder on as well. So taking a little bit of concealer, I'm using a big fluffy brush and I'm going to place this underneath the eyes and blend it all the way out to the top of the cheekbone. Just again by tapping it into the skin, and then you can buff right up underneath the eyes. I'm also going to take this over the eyelid area. I would not recommend using a waterproof concealer around the eyes because that will tend to settle into fine lines, wrinkles, and tend to make the eye area look quite dry and wrinkly. So I would prefer to use more of a natural finish concealer, something with still a little bit of glow to it. And I want to get that right up underneath the lash line. Sometimes what can happen with really full coverage products and matte foundations in particular is the blend between the concealer and the foundation just won't mix. They just kind of separate each other and it looks really, really awful. So do some experimenting with the types of foundations and concealers you have and make sure that the ones that you use together have complementary ingredients to make sure that they blend together really nicely and you can't see the difference between the foundation and the line of concealer. So now I want to set my base because I don't want it to move anywhere, and I'm not going to apply any cream products over the top of this. So I'm only going to be applying powder, blush and contour and that sort of thing. So I need to set the entire cheek area, and I also want to set the areas that will tend to go oily throughout the day. So depending on the person and depending on what their skin type is like, if someone gets really shiny throughout the day, mainly on the forehead, put a little bit of extra powder on the forehead. If someone has just slightly oily skin but it tends to be pretty normal, what you can do is just set the areas like the cheeks where you're going to apply powder products over the top just to help them blend. But you don't necessarily need to set, say, the forehead, because a lot of matte foundations will tend to be self-setting, so you don't need to add that extra layer of powder. The powder just ensures that you don't go shiny throughout the day and kind of keeps everything in place. It is really important that you use it where you need it. For powder, you have a couple different options. Translucent powder is going to work for everybody, so this is great to just set the entire face really lightly. A foundation powder like this is actually going to provide even more coverage. So this is great for somebody who may have more acne prone skin, or your foundation hasn't given you quite enough coverage that you would like. You can always add a layer of matte powder over the top. That's going to add that layer of coverage as well to really help make the skin look flawless. This particular translucent powder is great to set the entire face, but it is not good for baking because it is a silicone based powder. So if you would like to bake your face, which I'm going to show you right now, you need to use a powder that is just a translucent powder, but that doesn't have silicone in it, because silicone creates flashback in photos. So I'm just going to take a little bit of translucent powder, tap it onto my palette, and for this I'm going to use a sponge. So you could apply your concealer with a sponge if you'd like, but I'm just going to tap away any of the wrinkles or creasing underneath the eyes first, and then we're going to dip our sponge into that powder and cover it with quite a decent amount of powder. And then I'm just going to look up and press that underneath the eye. Be really careful where you place this product, because anywhere that you set into place or any lines that you create will be stuck there. So I try and make a nice straight edge on the side of the nose, and then in a triangle all the way out to the cheekbone. And then I'll use a brush just to kind of lightly tap over the edges, just to make sure that I'm not going to set like a line in my cheek. Now, I will warn you, baking does not work for everybody. I personally don't bake my face because I find it can emphasize fine lines, it can make me look more dry, but if someone's got more oily skin, it could possibly save their makeup and keep it on for a longer period of time. So I'm just going to powder the smile line area as well, while I have just a bit left over, and the top of the chin, and basically anywhere that tends to move around a lot when I talk. But I can already feel that powder underneath my eyes kind of tightening and making my makeup feel really set, because essentially what it's doing is drawing out all the moisture out of that product. So that powder is taking away all the moisture in that concealer. For the rest of my face, I'm going to use the face powder, which actually has a bit more coverage in it, and just a big fluffy brush, and I'm going to just pat that on my cheeks where I'm going to do my contour later on. And be warned that some powders will tend to oxidize your face a little bit more, and matte foundations in particular tend to oxidize. So when you actually color match yourself, make sure you look at it when it is set and not when it's wet. But if you put a little stroke of foundation on someone's neck and then 10 minutes later come back, more than likely, if it's a matte foundation, all of the moisture in that foundation evaporates into the air and then leaves behind just the true color of that foundation. So you need to look at the true color and not the wet color of the foundation. So at this stage, I would actually move on to doing something like the eye makeup. I'll do the brows and kind of just finish off the rest of the makeup. Leave about 5 to 10 minutes before you actually wipe away that bake. You can leave it on for as long as you like, but after about 5 minutes, it should be okay to kind of wipe off. So you need to take a nice fluffy brush, something really flexible, and then you're just going to lightly swipe and flick away the powder that's underneath the eyes, so that way you can't see that powder anymore, and you're just dusting away all the excess. So you can see pretty much my entire face has no shine to it whatsoever. So if I had really oily skin, this would be brilliant because it's going to make sure that my makeup lasts all day long. So I'm going to finish up the rest of my makeup and I'll show you guys the final result. I've now finished the rest of my makeup and I'm going to finalize this makeup by putting some setting spray on. The reason I really like using setting spray, especially with a more matte foundation, is because it helps to rehydrate all of those powder products that you've used on the face. And if someone's looking a little bit flat, it'll add that life back into the face as well. So just holding it at an arm's length or about at least like a ruler length, 30 centimeters or so away from the face. I like to do 1, 2, 3, 4. And maybe one right in the center. That way I've covered all the different areas of my face. I've covered the forehead, the cheek, and then the center. Try not to oversaturate the skin, especially if you have eyeliner or mascara on, because it could potentially get that wet and smudge it. So it's just basically to finalize the makeup, make sure it's gonna last all day long and their skin's gonna look really nice and fresh and not dried out, even though you're using so many matte products. By placing things like highlight on top of the cheekbones, you can still add that glowy texture into the skin, but you're matte where it counts, which is gonna be especially the forehead, the T-zone, where you don't wanna go shiny throughout the day. So I hope you enjoyed this matte foundation routine. Remember, by determining someone's skin type, we're going to be able to find the products that are gonna suit them the best. So I hope you enjoyed this video and I'll see you at your next tutorial. Bye!